better. Nobody's going to be able to teach it and share it better than the person who's living it. Stand up. This is part of the job. We started fostering many, many years ago. We fostered with a private agency called Children's Choice in Philadelphia. Some of you might know that agency, wonderful organization. We were with them for 15 years, starting by fostering medically fragile children, and then also later on in our career fostered children with therapeutic needs. You're going to hear me talk about my faith in here. I'm not trying to convert anybody. But if you are not a person of faith when you start this work and you stay in it for more than 10 minutes, you are likely to be by the time you finish. Because this is not work that is for the faint of heart. You're going to need to draw on something stronger than yourself to be able to do this. What we're going to talk about today is how you draw on those strengths and you find those strengths to serve the children that are in your care. I want to tell you a little bit about the dynamic in our family. As I said, we've been married for 30 years. We have 5 biological children. We started fostering, and our first child who came into placement with us was a 2-year-old little guy. And our youngest biological daughter at the time was also 2. And so this was our very first experience. And we were newbies. You know what it is when you're a newbie. You have some preconceived notions about what this is going to be like. And the story that we heard about this child, when this child came into care, was that he had been neglected, kept in a crib, and as a result, he couldn't walk. He was emaciated. He was very low weight, failure to thrive. He also had hydrocephaly. He had bilateral shunts that moved the fluid from his brain down to his abdomen. His body weight was so low that you could actually see those little shunts under the skin. You could track them the whole way down the side of his head and to his tummy. Now, we had been through those children's choice trainings where they tell new parents about how you don't make judgments, right? We'd been through those trainings. And we were trying really hard not to make judgments, and if you'd have asked me then, I would have said, no, I wasn't making any judgments. But the minute we saw that child and we took that child, we became connected to him and loved him almost immediately. And almost immediately started to feel some things about how he came to be in that place. Why was he there? And we started to have some opinions about his family. And if you'd asked me, I'd have said, no, my mind is open. That's not my part in this. I'm not making judgments. But in my heart, I was making some judgments. That little boy was with us for over a year. Now, I'm going to tell you, we got a lot of Children's Choice Failure to Thrive kids. I want you to look at us. Everybody looks at us and says, we know how to feed people. We do okay with that. If you're not eating enough, I know how to fix that. I have the technology. And so this little guy gained a good amount of weight. He was in all kinds of therapeutic services and interventions. We had him working with early intervention. We had him doing physical therapy, occupational therapy, developmental therapy. He was doing everything he needed to do, but he was still not improving the way we thought that he ought to be improving. And the doc finally said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to run some additional testing, and we're going to see what else might be going on here. And when they did, they called us in to do a test called an EMG. Anybody in here familiar with what an EMG is? Okay. An EMG, if you don't know about it, I'm going to tell you it's one of the most barbaric tests you can imagine. What they do is take a wire probe and they insert it into large muscle. They do that without anesthesia. They conduct electrical current through that probe so they can see how the muscle is reacting and responding to the stimulus. See if the muscle's working the way it's supposed to be working. And so I've got this little 2-year-old, at that point almost 3-year-old, and we spent 45 minutes in a room with me restraining him while they inflicted pain on him. I want to tell you, up to that point, that was about one of the worst moments in my life. I was furious with those people. Furious with those people. They had not prepared us for that. I didn't know that's what was going to happen. And so by the time we got to the end of that test, I picked up that kid and I ran out to get him dressed, and I was just wanting to get out of that room as fast as I could get out of that room. And while I was dressing him, a nurse came in and said, the doc needs to talk to you. And they want to know if you have if you have medical rights. Now that hung really heavy in the air, didn't it? And I said, no, I don't have medical rights, but I was kind of annoyed because all the consents had been signed. Why are you asking me about that? Test is over. And I realized pretty quickly there's a problem. And they said, how fast can we get parents here? We need to get them here quickly. The parents were in Philadelphia. It took 24 hours for a worker to arrange for them to get to Hershey, Pennsylvania, so that they could be there and meet with us in a dock. In a little anteroom outside the clinic, we sat down with a physician, 2 caseworkers, biological family, and us. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about this biological family. There were 5 children in this family. The child that was with us was the only child that was removed. The only child. The other children were healthy, well-adjusted, okay. Mom and Dad, from the time that this happened, asserted and contended that they had not done anything wrong. Mom and Dad were, at the end of the day, guilty of nothing more than not being undereducated, underrepresented, unable to articulately advocate for themselves in this system. And as a result, when we sat in that little anteroom that day and the doctor came in and told us, this child has muscular dystrophy. I don't know what you know about muscular dystrophy, but there are 7 forms of muscular dystrophy, and 1 form is fatal, and that's Duchenne's. This little guy had Duchenne's. What we thought was neglect was disease process. What we thought were parents who were being neglectful and possibly even abusive were parents who, at this point, we understand now, just lost a year in the life of their dying son because we didn't understand what was happening. So we love this little boy like he's our own. We find out that he's dying. And almost the next breath, we realize, what is the implication of that? You know what the implication of that is? There's a lot of CYA going on now, isn't there? DHS is going to move that kid out of our home as quick as they can get him out because they've made a mistake. They need to get him home, and they need to get him home right now. And so 2 days before Christmas, this little boy left our home, and this is just a few days after we learned about his diagnosis. I share this story with you, and this is new for me. This is the first time I've told this story, and I'm wearing the good waterproof makeup because I know I will not make it through an entire conference of telling stories and get out of here not looking like Alice Cooper. Because it's bad. We tell those stories, and they still, to this day, after all these years, still tug at places in your heart that are difficult. Because I want you to understand, the day that that little boy left was the last day we saw him. And we will not see him again until probably the other side. And he may be there already, and we don't know that. He's, at this point, a young man and would be very advanced in his disease process and may have gone home already, so we don't know that. The reason I bring it up to you is because I want to talk to you about what your role is in advocacy. I want you to leave here today, and my hope and my goal for you is when you leave here today, that you leave here today with the notion that you might be the person who is able to see the picture for what it really is. We in this room who are closest to children, and I speak first to foster parents and adoptive parents, because you are the frontline advocate. You are the one who is there every day. You're the one who is seeing everything happen. You're also the one who is the most emotionally invested. You're the one for whom advocacy may be the most difficult sometimes because your heart gets tied up in ways that make this hard to do. I hope you leave here with an ability to fight hard for what's right, even if it's painful in the moment. And that you leave here with a desire to stand up for kiddos that can't stand up for themselves, sometimes for parents who can't stand up for themselves. This training focuses on helping resource parents enhance and refine their advocacy skills. We define advocacy as an ability to assess a child's needs across a broad spectrum and identify those needs to other members of the treatment team. We'll identify various situations where resource parents are called upon to be the frontline advocates to meet educational, medical, and therapeutic service needs of children and teach strategies for communicating effectively. We'll also address how to access some resources. I'm going to talk about the whys, why you want to be a good advocate. Let me ask you, how good do you think you are at this advocacy thing as you get started? What's a challenge about being an advocate? Inexperience. How is that a challenge? Inexperience is a difficult thing when you're getting started because you feel intimidated. You feel intimidated. You don't know who you should be screaming at and what you should be screaming for. It's a frustrating place to be, to feel that you have a child with needs that you can't meet and you don't know how to get them met. But I'm going to tell you right up front that there is an entire collection of people on this planet who have assigned crazy to me. It is a price that is worth the exchange of getting heard sometimes. Being respectful, and we're going to talk about that later, being respectful and speaking truth are the two things that I disclaim then about crazy. If I have been respectful to you and I have spoken truth, and you still want to call me crazy, I'm okay with that. If I have been respectful and I have spoken truth and you haven't heard me, I'm going to speak truth louder. I'll speak it to the next person. I'll speak it to your supervisor or somebody else, occasionally to the media. I will speak it to whomever I can get to respectfully until I get heard. And I understand that there are people along the way who will be frustrated in that effort. Everybody's got an agenda. And advocacy needs to be clean hands from the agenda. So at some point in this thing of when we were taking babies and infants and toddlers, and I woke up one morning and said, man, I'm old. Maybe it's time to not do that anymore. So we realized that our time of fostering was coming to a season where we were maybe through that part, but I still wanted to be involved, and so I became a CASA as well. One of the most powerful things about a CASA is that their hands are clean, meaning nobody writes me a check. I have no interest other than the child's welfare. Everybody that you deal with in relationship to a child will have some interest, whatever that interest is. If it's a teacher, then it's what's happening educationally and professionally for them in that environment. How are they meeting their goals? How are they managing and working with the supervisor? Are they having a problem with the child? Everybody has their own interests. When I say frontline advocate and we talk about how you are a frontline advocate for a child, I mean, we need to say to ourselves that we are willing to be that person who has clean hands. We are willing to be that person that even though I prefer to keep that child who is dying of Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, even though I believe I can give him better care, even though I know for a fact that I have better resources and a better home as far as the amenities go, even though I know I can get him better access to physicians and therapists. What was best for him was not to have all those good things, but to have the best thing, which was the company of his parents while he was dying. You understand what I'm saying? So frontline advocacy means that we have clean hands, and clean hands is a choice. It is for an administrator or worker being able and willing to lay down whatever my numbers say, whatever my placement issues are, and only think about and work for what is in the best interest of the child. I'm going to tell you, social workers have a challenging existence. They come into this work because they have a heart for this work. But every social worker I've ever met says, this is not what I thought I was going to do. I kill a lot of trees. I spend a lot of time in my office. I do a lot of reports. This is not what I thought. Any social workers in here are with me on this? You get an amen? Okay. This is not what they thought. So it is advocacy and being really good at what you do. It is being constantly able to take yourself back to that commitment that you make to have clean hands. And that's difficult. We're going to ask you to facilitate good communication between systems. And we're going to talk a little bit about systems in just a few seconds. We are overrun with systems. We are overrun with systems. Each of them with an agenda. Each of them with their own needs, their own quotas, their own requirements. We are overrun with systems. But at the end of the day, what you're looking to do by being an advocate is change a life. You're looking to impact a life. Isn't that really why we're all here? That's the point. For us foster parents in the room, there's an entire segment of the population out there who thinks that you do this because you collect a really big check. I tell folks who have that opinion, come on in. Spend a day at my house. Do the math. You will see that for the 24 hours a day I spend doing this work, the compensation all ends up on the wrong side of the decimal point. The emotional work and energy that goes into this is not something you can compensate with a check. The cost to your family, financially, physically, emotionally, can't be compensated with a check. But there are folks who believe that's the reason you're doing this. The real reason we do this is because we want to change a life. We want to be the ones who were able to step in and say, you were headed in a direction that was a lot of pain, but I'm going to come stand by you and walk you to a better place. Isn't that why we're doing this? So when this gets difficult, I want you to remember that every child is worth the fight. Every child is worth the fight. I want to say something to you that is probably marginal. And I really struggled with myself yesterday. I had something happen yesterday, and I knew when it happened that it was something I wanted to share with you. So I asked this woman, I met a woman who was at a doctor's office with me. We were both waiting to go in and see a doc with our kids, psychiatrist with our kids. And we had arrived at this appointment really early, and the doctor was running really late. So I was 45 minutes early, and he was 45 minutes late, and I had a very wiggly 7-year-old. So we had colored everything, read everything, walked around the building 4 times, had several drinks of water, climbed under and through all the chairs, talked to every person in the room. It was a busy afternoon. And there was a mom came in, a foster mom, and sat across the way from me. And my son is not of my ethnicity. He's an African-American child, and so she tagged me as a foster parent. And she sat there and she had 2 young girls with her, adolescent girls, also African-American children. This is also a Caucasian woman. And she started to talk to me as though those girls weren't in the room about what a great foster parent she is. About what a great job she's doing. About how much work this is, how much paperwork it is. They have no idea what I do. And I tried several times to shut her up, and I was unsuccessful. And my heart was broken because I wanted to grab up those 2 girls and take them to the side and say, you know what? You're going to be okay. She's crazy. You're going to turn 18 and get away. She will still be crazy. We are in a system where children don't get the message that they are worth it. That they're important, that every child you serve is worth every second of effort. And if the only thing you do, and I want you to get this at the beginning of this thing. If you want to assess how you're doing as an advocate, here's what you do. Don't tell me how many of your goals you met, although I want you to meet your goals. I want you to stay at it until you get it right. The judge of your success is to look at that child and say, do you feel loved? Do you feel that you are important to me? Do you see that I am willing to fight for you for no other reason? Not because I got a check, not because it makes me feel good, not because people part like the Red Sea when I come into an IEP, but because you are worth the fight. Have I engendered in that child this thing that, you know what? Wherever else you go, you know right from the minute you walked in my door that you were worth it. Then you have been successful. Then you have served that child with clean hands and honorably. That's the bar you got to get over. I want you to get significantly over a higher bar than that. I'm going to tell you something. I am not a social worker. I am just a mom. But I have learned more. I feel like somewhere there ought to be a place where if you have survived as a foster parent for X number of years, there should be a place where you can go and they'll give you a degree. All in favor? Aye. Can we work on that, please? I would really like to have that. There are so many things that I have learned within this work that we're doing that I feel like I've got a better view than some of the folks who have the degree, because each of them are in their individual pockets of responsibility. We who are in this room are seeing it from a wider perspective. There's something to be learned about that. Talking about the systems that touch our children. I want you to get a picture in your mind of a child standing with you, maybe a little guy, on a busy city street. Bodies as far as you can see. Any one of the children that we serve, you pulled any case file for any kid under the service or care of any person in this room, and for that child, there are hundreds and hundreds of people attached to that file that have some connection, acquaintance, contact, responsibility, plan for that kid. Would you agree with that? And they are vast and many. We've got government child welfare agencies. We've got private agencies. And within those agencies, both of them, we have workers and supervisors, interim supervisors, secretaries who are moving the paperwork through, the folks who are changing up, because heaven knows, and this is, okay, I'm going to ask all the social workers, please close your ears, forgive me for what I'm about to say. Foster parents have this notion that we think that all of you sweet little girls who go into social work, you come out and you start working, you're all about 20, you have no kids, you stay in this long enough to figure out that this is not something you want to do to pay off those student loans, because this is crazy. And then many of them move on to something that is less stressful and pays better. For those of you who have stayed, bless you. We love you. Please stay. But you will admit that we have a high turnover because this is hard work. So a child may have many caseworkers, many supervisors, not just one or two. And in the course of their stay, it can turn into dozens of workers. Then we've got the legal system. We've got the legal system as it deals with mom and dad who may be incarcerated. We've got juvenile. If you've got a kid who's had trouble with criminal justice issues, you've got the CASA and the guardian ad litem. You've got dozens of people, including the judge, right up to and including the judge, who have an interest in that child. All of the therapeutic services, all of the medical systems, educational systems. Anybody in here know about IEPs? Then we've got, that portion is now all what we've inflicted on them. But let's recognize that by the time the kid gets to us, they're already working within systems. They're family systems, and sometimes they are complex. Sometimes they are very complex. We have their cultural systems, and a lot of our kids are getting moved out of one cultural reality into another one. I'm going to tell you, Children's Choice out in central Pennsylvania, we have a large contingent of Mennonite families. We love our Mennonite families. They are fantastic families. They are willing to take, back in the times when people weren't willing to take babies with AIDS, our Mennonite families stepped up and said, give us all of them. We'll take all of them. And they love those babies and care for those babies, and they're wonderful with those very significantly medically needy kids. But I'm going to tell you something. A kid that's grown up in West Philly and ends up in Lewisburg without a TV, where your nearest neighbor smells like cow patties, and everybody's wearing dresses and funny little hats. It's a shock to them. And they are out of their system. They're out of their element. They don't know. The ground has shifted beneath them. Does it matter? Are they still getting fed? Are they still getting cared for? Are they still being loved? Of course they are. But it is impacting them. It's touching their lives. Same with their social systems and religious systems. I want you to think of this as the bones and the muscle of child welfare, all these systems. You are the connective tissue. You are the thing that connects the muscle to the bone so that this thing can move and work. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there. It will not be effective. It's not going to run. It's not going to move. It's not going to have life that brings peace to a child unless we make it move and work together. You are the thing that causes these systems to be connected. You are the person that makes them talk to each other. And I'm going to tell you, these people are very idiosyncratic. Any one of those systems think they are the only one. They are the only one. They will tell you that they know that there's a lot of other things going on in that child's life, but they really think that they are the only one. At the end of the day, it's about meeting their objectives. So you need to be the one that makes sure that they are looking across systems and connecting pieces to make this happen. All right, we're going to talk about what happens when the child comes into you. Now, I want to ask you this question. How many of you have had a situation where you have become acquainted with a child through their file, and then maybe came to meet the child and found out the file wasn't entirely accurate? Anybody in the room? I'm thinking every hand's going to go up. I'm going to tell you that our 16-year-old son is a child that, had I only become acquainted with him through his file, I would have run, crying and screaming the other way. I would have said, I can't take that kid. There's no way. Can't take that kid. Because what I had been told about that kid is that he was manipulative, that he liked to do things to get attention, that he would wet the bed for attention, that he didn't play and share well with others, that he often ignored you just to tick you off. This sounds like a TFC kid, right? I want to touch on this. If any one of these systems that we talked about took a magnifying glass and came and looked at your life today, what kind of pathology might they find about you? If they came into your home and your life and they looked through every corner and every facet of your family relationships and your habits, 24 hours a day, what you do, what you say, what you think, how you behave when you're angry, when you're tired, when you're frustrated. If there were always eyes in that system looking at you, do you think somebody within one of those myriad of systems might say, that person's crazy? They have a behavioral problem. They might say, he's oppositionally defiant. I think that kid from New York needs some meds. Because he doesn't do what he's told. And he does it just to piss me off. I want us to step back from this and say that we are in places where once something gets attached to a file, it sticks like it's on there with tar balls. And that file moves through so many different places that by the time it gets in your hands, I would say that the chances that it's a good representation of that soul that you're taking care of, not very high. So when you make an assessment about a child's needs, I want you to read the file. In fact, and I'm going to say to the workers and the administrators in the room, I want you to give a parent everything you can get your hands on. Don't withhold anything. Give it all to them. I would much rather have a parent run screaming at the beginning than take a child and allow an attachment to start and then say, I don't know if I'm up for that. So I am all for full disclosure. Tell them everything. But I'm going to say to you parents, shame on you if you turn a child away based on a file. Because often what we see is not what's there. I'm going to tell you the little boy that I would have run from, the now 16-year-old. You come tell him about the now 16-year-old.
I want to tell you about my experience with Kareem, because this is kind of crazy. I didn't know anything about the file because when Kareem came to us, I was a little too young at that point to really understand what most of that stuff was saying anyway, so I didn't really care about the file. What I remember about when Kareem came to us is that we were at a church function, and we were there pretty late into the evening, and one of my mom's good friends who actually got us affiliated with Children's Choice and kind of helped us get the ball rolling with the foster care system, was picking him up and transporting him to us to deliver him, with all of his stuff, to come home with us from that church function that night. When Kareem walked through the door, I don't think he looked at anybody else. He waved to my mom, and he came and jumped in my arms and gave me a big hug. And I don't think for the rest of the next 3 weeks that we spent a whole lot of time apart from each other. He got to be a really good friend of mine, really quick. My parents were out one evening, and they were out on a date, and I was babysitting for them. We were taking care of the kids.
You're not supposed to say that.
He's adopted now.
Nobody heard that. For the record, my mother, who had all her clearances, was also present. You're killing me,
He's
Smalls.
adopted now.
Go.
It's legal. No, I'm sorry. It's all part of the story. I apologize. You didn't hear that part. Next up from the record. In any event, we were taking care of him, and everything was going fine. And we had a disagreement throughout the evening. And hearing about the file now afterwards, it's kind of ironic. There was a point throughout the evening where I didn't feel like he was really wanting to pay attention to a whole lot that I had to say. And at that point, I was thinking he was probably just in a bad mood and not really wanting to listen to his older brother because mom and dad are going to be home soon and they'll take care of you then. And it was one of those kind of things. My parents returned home later on that evening, and he was back to normal. And I said, okay, it's just an episode, no big deal. Later on, about a week later, I had just returned home from a camp out with our scouting troop, and my brother came in the room, and he looked really different. I didn't really know how to explain it. His eyes were glassed over. He was not really able to talk at all, and I didn't know what was going on. And my parents came home shortly thereafter. My mom walked in the room and sat down on the floor, and my brother came in and fell in her lap and started having a seizure. We didn't know what that was at the time, but that caused an immediate emergency trip to the hospital. And a couple hours later, we found out that my brother had a very large tumor in the front of his brain. So according to the file, the defiance and the doing things to aggravate you and all of those type of things weren't anything that he can control. It was actually a result of a medical condition that he had no control over at all. And to see him now, he is probably one of the most impressive, dedicated, hardworking people that you'll ever meet. Obviously very socially well-adjusted, in his absence here today. But he's an amazing person. And based off of what was on a piece of paper, we never would have known that.
What Nick didn't tell you, this tumor was a 66 cubic centimeter hemangioma. 66 cubic centimeters the size of your fist. It's in a 7-year-old's skull. This child had emergency surgery. The tumor was resected. It was non-cancerous. What they told us is right temporal lobe is where we have gross motor and vision. And so there was a likelihood that because of the size of the tumor and how long it had been there, that when he came out of the surgery, that he may not be able to walk and he may not be able to see us. And we spent hours in prayer and crying and holding hands and hanging with family. And we went back to the PICU in the recovery unit. And he looked right at us and wiggled his feet and said, "Can I eat now?" But what it has done, it has left him with a significant reading disability. This is a child who, in every other way, he has an above average intelligence, he's articulate, he's aware, but he can't read. He cannot look at letters and associate sound with them. And a lot of what we've learned about advocacy has come from firsthand experience in conducting that child through school, through medical systems, through therapeutic systems, trying to find how we get him to the place in life where he can be. And I want to tell you, this little guy, he's not a little guy anymore, he's taller than me, and he's happy to tell you that he has the lowest body fat content of any Fike. You know, he's got a swimmer's, he's an athlete, he's a track star guy. And he's happy to point that out at every opportunity. And when he was little, he went to, he got to do Special Olympics every year because of his learning disability. And Nick was his buddy. You know, you have a buddy at Special Olympics. And so Kareem would love to take Nick and say, "It's my brother, can't you see? The pasty big white guy and the cutie little black kid who's got absolutely no body fat at all." So what we have learned in doing this process and working through it is that you never give up, that you assess yourself and you reassess. Assessment is an ongoing process. What you think it is today may not be what it is tomorrow, what may not be what it is next week, and I don't want you to get stuck in your own fight. Let me explain what I mean by that. When you have a moment, if you're a really good advocate, you're going to have those New Yorker moments where you stomp your foot and you scream at somebody. I never want you to be afraid to walk away from the rant and say, you know what, that's what I thought, and I believed it. I don't think that today, and this is why. And I'm still prepared to stomp my foot about it. You know, we evolved. First, what we did with Kareem was we started fighting about how do we teach him to read? This process went on this started in 2nd grade. He's now a junior. We've been in these IEP conversations for a really long time. So we started talking about, what are you doing to teach him to read? What can we do differently? Let's get him a different curriculum. Let's get him a reading specialist. Let's get him ESY. Let's talk about different models. If what you're doing in West Shore School District doesn't work, then let's look at a district where a model is working and let's pay for it. Let's do that. Let's make it happen. So we did that. Didn't work. And there were people in that system saying, well, I did what I was supposed to do. You know, we met our obligation to you. Didn't work. Okay, so you're not done. That means we're going to go back to the table, we're going to try something else. We have somebody here that goes to the elementary school where my kids go, and she's back there laughing about this. They've been wonderful with us. But they have learned that when we come into an IEP meeting, we're going to froth at the mouth, and we're going to stomp our feet, we're going to say, well, you know what, if that didn't work, then let's do something else. And finally we got to the point where we said, you know what, he's not going to read the way we do. So what else can we do? What else can we do to make him functional? I want you to work this problem with me. Let's do this exercise. I've got this kid. What else can we do? Because what I don't want for this child is to be, if I have a child who's articulate and has a fantastic work ethic and is intelligent, but he can't read, how far is he going to go? What are his opportunities academically, educationally, in employment? What are we going to do? Adaptive tech. If you can't hear her, she's saying adaptive tech. There's all kinds of technology. Let's find the technology. I'm going to tell you, at the moment, because we had made West Shore School District hire a tutor, and then we made them change a curriculum. They had to buy the curriculum because they didn't have it. And my kid was the only kid using it. Then they had to train a teacher to use that curriculum. And then we came back to a meeting and said it didn't work. And I said, it's okay, I got another check you can write. We're going to try something else. And we went to adaptive tech. And then we said, okay, what we need now is a computer. Because we went and looked for a model. And we went to the blind and we said, what can we do? Because I have a child who can do the curriculum with mainstream kids. He shouldn't be stuck in a learning support environment because he can do this work. Furthermore, socially, he needs to be in that environment with those normal kids. I'm going to tell you that that's a misnomer. There is no such thing as a normal high school student. At least not where I'm living. If that's normal, we need to be very concerned. Abnormal is the state of normalcy when you're a teenager. But he needed to be with peers. He needed to not be. He's already an African-American child in a pretty pasty school district. We don't like to talk about that, but that's a challenge. That's a challenge. People were good to him. I don't want to say that he was persecuted or he was... But as a fat white girl, I'm going to tell you that I prefer when there are other fat people in the room. I like it. Makes me feel better. I go to Hershey Park. I don't want you to get this, by the way. I go to Hershey Park, and I get in a line at Hershey Park on the roller coaster, and I'm looking for the girl who's fatter than me in front. Because I want to make sure she's going to get in the ride. Because I don't want to be the one holding up the line, because I can't get the thing shut. Okay? If you are different among your peers for whatever reason, you already come in with a systems problem. So he was already different. He already had a family that didn't look like him. He now has a scar on his head that goes from here all the way down to his neck. that I can't hide with hair. This poor kid, he's got the coarsest hair. And I'm going to tell you something. I tried to learn how to, because I'm thinking I could cornrow that, you know? I could like cornrow around that, and then you wouldn't see it so well. He wanted it, he wanted it cornrowed until he decided that there were some things that his mother was just not genetically prepared to do. And God love him, after his first 3-hour braiding session with me, he sat there in front of the mirror and is like, do I have to wear it to school? No, you can take it. Oh, good. So we just cut it. But he's good. But now he has this very visible scar. He's also in among peers where he can't function. Do you know how many times a day you have to read something? A lunch menu, a schedule, what room you're in, where there's assembly going on. Plays basketball, what the basketball schedule looks like, who's on your team. It is a painful challenge to watch. And we wanted him to be able to fit every corner of his life that he could fit in. And that required some stomping and screaming and carrying on. It required that we say to the people who had to spend the money, yeah, you're going to spend the money. You collect the check. You take my taxes. You say you'll do this. So I got a kid that's going to cost a little more. Suck it up. Write the check. And you know what? They have come to love him and be in this fight with us. We're no longer at the place where we have to do it. We now have a team of people over there who have watched this kid move from 2nd grade to 11th grade. And they love him because they've seen him in the fight. And they're looking for the places that they can help him. Now I have to share this with you. He would be thrilled to know that I told you about the cheerleader thing. I don't know that he'd be thrilled if I tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. We're worried about where he's going to get he wants a summer job. Because at our house, here's the deal. If you drive, you're going to pay your own insurance. If you have a cell phone, mom and dad will cover you for the first 6 months of cell phone. After 6 months, cell phone is your responsibility. So these two things, car insurance and cell phone, are the first things you budget for. You also are required in our family, our kids serve missions. They have to save for their missions. So that's a percentage of their income. They have to generate income. They have to generate income when they get to that age. We're looking at this kid who really wants to work, and we're wondering, where in the world are we going to find him a place, right? You think about the normal places kids go for summer work, McDonald's and fast food places. It's not going to happen for this kid. Nick's wife is a hairdresser. She manages a salon. Just opened a new shop. They asked Kareem if he would come in and spend the weekend of their opening weekend dressed up in a Luigi suit, holding a sign out front, said, "Great clips, $2.99, come on in." Did you see it? That's my baby. That's my baby. I want to tell you what happened, though. This child understands that he's worth it. He understands that if you meet him and you believe he can't do it, he thinks that's just because you haven't met him for long enough. He has an internal drive that says, I'm going to be successful, and you're going to see that. Or you'll get out of my way. Either way is okay with me. And he worked that little silly job with all of the heart and energy of somebody who had ownership of that company. And the man who does own the company called us up and said, I'd like to employ him full time. What are you going to do, cut hair? I said, it doesn't matter. He's got this work ethic where he never sits down. He's moving constantly. So he's sweeping up the floor. He's answering the phones. He's helping customers find their way in. He's making sure people are getting waited on. That's empowering him. Whatever he does, he's going to be successful at it. He's going to own that darn store someday, and he's going to do it even though he can't read. You know why? Because nobody's told him that he can't. And we've been willing to stand between him and the people who would tell him he can't. And say, oh, no, you don't. You will not do that to this child. So he's going to be okay. I hope you meet him next year. And know that he's having a good time where he's at. Trust me. All right. Once you have developed the plan, it's important that you share it. Now, I want to say this to you. Just because you know what the plan is for the kid in your home, don't assume that your social worker or anybody else in those systems knows it. Your plan may be in opposition to some other plans. You need to be able to articulate to those people who are decision making for your child why you think the things that you think. What's one of the most difficult things a parent has to do to tell us? I'm going to tell you something. You go to a social worker and tell them, I think this thing of reunification is not a good move. You can watch their eyes roll back in their head, glaze over like a lizard. You lose them in that moment. How many of you workers over there have had a parent tell you think you're moving to reunification too quick? Yeah, your eyes glazed over, didn't they? This is about reputation. This is about reputation. And this is about trust. There will be some times when you will need to hear from a worker, you're too close and your heart's tied up. And I need to say the things to you and you need to hear the things I'm saying to you because I know you're hurting and you're in pain, but you don't see it the way I see it. You need to be able to hear what that worker is saying. And a worker, when you have a parent come to you and say, I think you're moving towards reunification too quickly, please don't glaze over too quick. Would you promise me that you're going to give them 30 seconds to make their case? And then make a case. And make a case something more than, but Johnny would have so much more with us. But Johnny loves us. But I have a pool. I'm in a good school district. You want to send him back to West Philly? What are you thinking? Those arguments are not with clean hands. Do you understand what I'm saying? So communication between systems is really key, and we need to be sure that those who are closest to the front line in advocacy, if we don't agree, at least we have made our best cases to each other, and we feel and believe that there's trust and we're being heard by each other. I have workers that have made me want to pull my hair out. I've had workers whom I think of as family to this day. The ones who I think of as family are not always the ones whom I agreed with. They are the ones who heard me. Even when we disagreed, they heard me. Being heard is a two-way street. It often happens that you have a county worker, the agency that's closest to the adjudication where the dependencies happen, and then you've got the managing worker who's in the home and seeing the kid. And those two people sometimes fail to communicate even more miserably than a foster parent and a worker do. And at the end of the day, we as resource parents need to understand, if not agree with this dynamic. These are not clean hand relationships. Agencies make money. Counties require numbers. Counties want to meet targets and objectives. They say to their working agencies, you got to meet these targets and objectives. If county says, and county is who placed a child, if county says this is where we're going, we're headed towards a reunification, there's only so much latitude that a worker close to the child has to wiggle around in that situation. Sometimes we as foster parents believe that our worker can sprinkle fairy dust on it and fix it because you are them. So go tell them and fix it. It's not like that. It's not like that. And all too often, workers go home with more heartaches. And you know what? We have a heartache because of this 1 or 2 or even 4 or 5 kids that we have. A worker is often having that heartache times 15 or more kids, and is not professionally disposed to tell you about what those issues are, restricted from telling you what those issues are. But I want you to give him or her enough latitude to know that when she goes home, she might be screaming at the ceiling too. All right, 2 stories. I want to say to you first that you're going to hear me say in the presentations that I do, and later on in this presentation on your PowerPoint, you'll see that I say empathy is connected to this notion of there but for the grace of God. You and I are here in this room today, in my opinion, again, no conversion intended, but there but for the grace of God. We're here in the capacity of serving those who are in trouble. We could have just as easily fallen to this planet and been the one in trouble. You understand? Okay. I want to tell you that you're looking at me, and I'm, getting my fluffiness notwithstanding, I'm okay. I'm pretty articulate. I dress kind of nice. I got a beautiful family. I do all right. I want to tell you that I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. I went to Shanksville Stony Creek High School. Shanksville, 9/11 fame, Shanksville. Very extremely rural community. My mother was a single parent. My mom fell in love with a naval officer who was shipped off to Vietnam. I was conceived right before he went to Vietnam. He was a river rat. I don't know if you know, that's a different story. But while he went off to Vietnam, she found out she's pregnant with me. She writes to him, I'm pregnant. He proposes, he's going to marry her. And then coming about December, she's about 6 or so months along, and she gets a letter from him that's got a card. And it's a picture of him and his wife and his son. I lied, I'm sorry. But I had a come to Jesus moment over here in the river in Vietnam, and so I don't know how I'm going to handle this when I get back. My mother owned a beauty shop in Somerset County. You do not want to be a single, pregnant, professional woman in Somerset County in the mid-1960s. You're just about as backwards as you can get. So she had a lot of stuff to deal with, going to work every day, unmarried, growing every second. Haven't tried to explain that. Furthermore, my mom had narcolepsy. Anybody know what narcolepsy is?
Got it.
You have narcolepsy? Okay, so you will relate to this. My mother has narcolepsy, and she has been medicated, as long as I can remember, with amphetamines. Now, she gets them legally. Doesn't matter. Somehow the body doesn't make a distinction whether you buy them on the street corner or you actually get a script and go to the drive-thru. So my mother is a drug addict for all intents and purposes. She is dependent on amphetamines and has been so all of her life. So she is a single parent with a drug problem under very difficult circumstances with very good family, which is why I'm okay. I had very good family. But I want you to understand that what we see from the outside is not what it necessarily is on the inside. And our picture of what it is doesn't have to fit the reality. People can be okay in systems and places and dynamics that are very, very different from what we expect them to be. And I'm going to tell you now, working in this system, that had an intake worker walked in, my mother lost it. Because of her narcolepsy, she lost her business. And she married a fellow who had a traumatic amputation. So they were both on disability when I was growing up. And I lived in a home that was a little trailer that had no electricity in most of it, only running water in one room, was infested with rats. Had an intake worker looked at my home at any given point, I might be here talking to you as somebody who was in the system and not somebody who's serving the system. Do you understand what I'm saying? But I love my mother. And she is a great and strong and amazing woman. And she is responsible in large part for who I am and the lessons that I learned. And I want to tell you that I have a cousin, my mom has a cousin who was a physician. And seeing the trouble my mom was in as a pregnant woman, offered to her in her pregnancy to take me, adopt me. And he had a beautiful home, and he had 3 kids, and a lovely life, and lots of money. And my mom said, no. Better is not always best. Better is not always best. The hardest thing we can do as a resource parent when you love that kid is be able to say that and believe it, and most of all to act on it and have clean hands. Hardest thing you're ever going to do. All right. Did not expect to go there. Gotta just say. Didn't expect to tell that story ever, let alone when somebody's got a camera on me. I'm hoping my mother still, doesn't write me out of the will for having said that in public, but she's a great woman. I love her. Okay. I want to talk about how we find resources. We've touched on some of this already. Some of it's just plain common sense, but some of it we want to say and repeat so you get it. How many of you in here have foster parent associations? Oh, no, you don't. Come on. More hands than that. Please tell me. That's it? Really? Sometimes foster parent associations turn into the foster parents union. You know, it's the place where we go to lodge complaints and gripe about y'all. Good and powerful foster parents associations are places where you go to exchange information and broaden your base of resources. They are the places where you go to talk to the only other people on the planet who understand what it is that you are doing and the amount of emotional energy it is taking you to do it. It is the place where you go to concentrate your efforts to exchange knowledge about what works, what doesn't, where did I find it, how did I access it, give you a phone number, connect you to a person. Parent to parent is the most powerful way we do business in advocacy for a resource parent. All right. I want to talk about go-to next resources. There are going to be sometimes you talk to somebody and you ask for help, and you're going to find out that the only thing you learned from that person is that you had nothing to learn from that person. You will talk to people and you'll say, why have you wasted this 15 minutes of my life for that? If you run into a situation where you are against the wall, I want you to just look for the next place. Sometimes the only thing you're going to get from somebody is, what do you suggest? Where might we go next? Is it a supervisor? Is there another agency? Is there another organization? Is there someone in your professional acquaintance that you might refer me to? Where can I go next? And sometimes that's how we get the next move. I want you to be willing to go to professional organizations. And when I say that, I want you to think way outside the box. This issue that I told you about Kareem in the reading, she hit on it so beautifully, and I was so grateful we had somebody that just, wow, got it right away. We looked for a professional organization that even though it didn't fit me, I talked to the Blind Association and said, we share some similar problems. What could you tell me? What's out there in adaptive tech? What could you educate me about? Look for professional organizations, not necessarily in your direct niche, but somebody that might be able to give you the go-to next. When I look at a foster parent, what I want to see is a parent who is treating that child as though that child was born to them. There is in our culture of service, and maybe within different agencies, there are some resource parents who feel this is really the caseworker's responsibility. And I'm getting the check so that you can have this space in my home, but then it's the worker's responsibility to set up services and go to visits and all that. I'm going to tell you that that's foreign to me because that was not the culture in my organization. So I don't want to offend anybody who's here who has that structure. If that's the way you guys work it, that's an interdepartmental issue that I guess you got to work out with your administrators. But I'm going to tell you, for me as a parent, if my child was, God forbid, ever to come into this system, I want that child, if it were my child, to be in the care of a parent who is going to actively look for the services that kid needs, whether it's early intervention, a developmental therapist, a feeding nurse, work at an IEP, whatever it is. We as a child welfare organization should be saying to a parent, stand up. This is part of the job. Parenting does not happen when you leave the labor room and now you're a parent. This is work. It's work. It requires that you go to meetings. It requires that you call doctors, that you keep appointments, that you get a planner, that you're going to go talk to the people who need to be. We want them to be the advocates for the child. So in the short term, I would say if you have a parent who's just not engaging because they don't know how, mentor them with a parent who's good at it. Connect them to a parent in a mentoring relationship that can show them the ropes about how to find their way around in this system. Provide additional training for them. Things like IEP meetings, if you've never had to be in one and you find yourself in an IEP meeting, especially if you're in an IEP meeting without educational rights, is a pretty sticky place to be. So additional training is required. Support is required. Maybe as a caseworker, you're going to need to go along so you can help them find a voice in that situation. But it should never happen that a parent is saying, I'm hands off, that's your job. It's going to often happen that I come to you and say, I need you to stand up with me. I need you to have a voice with me, worker, because I'm not getting where I need to go. But it should never be on a worker to do it. in your pre-service training is a really perfect time to bring in seasoned resource parents. To bring in those folks who are doing it and doing it well and hold them up as a model for the ones who are just coming in, and let them talk, let them teach, let them be the ones, because nobody's going to be able to teach it and share it better than the person who's living it. And another resource parent will be able to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly of what this looks like. And there are too many parents who are coming in. Every agency is out there beating the bushes for families because we all want to increase our pool for families. But far too often we are getting families who are coming in the back door looking to adopt. They're looking to do foster to adopt. And that's being sold a bill of goods that is in direct conflict with what our place is here in the moment. Meaning that if I'm taking you on as a foster parent and I'm asking you to support a goal of reunification, but you came in here thinking you were going to get to adopt that kid, I have set up a conflict. So I'm all about resource parents being involved in recruitment, resource parents being involved in pre-service training and in ongoing training. And that will solve a lot of the problems. If we collectively as an organization stand up and say, this is where the bar is, this is what it looks like to be a good parent. And we hold that up and we say, this is what it looks like. It means you're going to do this. You will find that some of our parents may not stay. They may go to XYZ agency because maybe their per diems are better, or maybe they have less paperwork. If they are inclined to do that, let them go. Go in peace. Have at. I'll hold the door for you. Because at the end of the day, what we want is an organization that is creating a culture of service and good outcomes. If you're not on for that, then that's okay, move on. We don't always fit. Doesn't mean that we should lower the bar to keep folks there. We want people who are good advocates and are willing to do the fight.